Okay, let's try that again since apparently I just recorded an entire intro and forgot to hit the unmute button on my microphone. This is a big shout out to all of the people who I work with who are incredible human beings and know how to do their jobs a lot better than I do. I had to call about 4 people in order to even figure out how to make this microphone work. So kudos to all you sound people, editors, like literally every single person I work with every day, down to costumes, because I had to figure out what to wear myself, and hopefully I don't look like a silly person. But on to the next segment of this. I would like to go back to what I said in the beginning, in that, I woke up from a surgery and COVID-19 had hit America in a very strong and different way than it had before. And so dealing with that was very strange, waking up in what is pretty much a Black Mirror episode. And the only thing that I could possibly think to do was to call people that I know across the world. I live a very charmed life now. That's something that I'm realizing through this entire global pandemic. I'm a very, very fortunate person. It wasn't always like that. I've struggled with homelessness multiple times in life. I was kicked out of my home pretty much at 15, and was told because of my sexuality that I couldn't be a part of a certain side of my family. So truly realizing the family that I've created around the globe, family and friends also equal family to me, has been remarkable and eye-opening, and I hope that this helps all of you out there realize that you are not alone. And with that, I would like to call a very great friend of mine who I've known since she was in middle school. She was my little sister Marlena's best friend growing up, and used to braid her hair. And she ended up becoming Miss America, and, has done so much for advocacy groups. She even ran for Congress last year. Hopefully won't be the last time you see such a brilliant mind and voice out there in the political sector. But yeah, let's give Mallory Hagan a call and see what things are like back in my hometown of Opelika, Alabama.
Hi, how are you?
It's crazy right now. It's so good to see your face.
It's good to see yours too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So
What is that behind you?
this is my chinchilla house. I have chinchillas now. Yeah. And
How many chinchillas?
two. I have 2. Somebody the other day, I was doing a video chat for my Italian class, and my Italian teacher was like, "Are you coming up with the cure for COVID with these giant rats?" And I was like, "No." I am not.
Oh, I mean, it'd be great if you were, but I'm glad that you're not. I'm glad you're doing this instead.
Well, yeah, we all have to do what we can do, right? Let's leave that to the professionals. Let's jump right into it. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Mallory Hagan. I was Miss America back in 2013. I have known Colin since as long as I can remember, and I'm quarantined.
Like the rest of us.
Like the rest of us.
Okay, cool. So can you please tell us where you are currently?
So currently I am in the Auburn Opelika area in Alabama, and chilling at home.
Do you live by yourself?
So I actually currently live with a roommate, and this has impacted my living situation in a couple of different ways. My parents are not too far away, and so they have pretty much been the only people that I have been in contact with. When I start to feel a little stir crazy, I'll go over to their house, hang out with our dogs and see them. And then it made things a little interesting because I do have a roommate, and, obviously I can control my own actions, but I can't control what my roommate does or where she goes. And so it's just been an interesting interesting waters to navigate by way of, having to be respectful of another person and then hoping that that other person is respectful of you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this quarantine has not in our country yet become a martial law situation. And so there are a lot of people that aren't practicing, social distancing. There are a lot of employment agencies that are not seen as essential in some states, but are still going to work. And so, this is something that over our entire giant country is being navigated in completely different ways. And so it is super interesting to think about the fact if you have a roommate or, you live with a person who happens to maybe work at a hospital, like there's a lot of interesting things that we've never even had to think about as a society.
Yeah, navigating the waters of doing your part, I think, has been obviously it's not an experiment by any stretch of the imagination, but if you want to look at it that way, it's been a really interesting social experiment to see who really understands their role in society and how their day-to-day interactions can actually impact, not tens, but hundreds of people throughout the day. And I think it's just been really interesting. I don't know how true this statement is, so I'll just start with that. But what I have heard is that Lee County, which is the county that I'm in, is the least practicing of social distancing of all the counties in Alabama. Like, it seems to be that business is just being conducted as usual. A lot of our restaurants have, of course, closed their indoor spaces to eat or their dining rooms. But other than that, I mean, people are out and about and shopping, and, most of the stores are still open. So that's a little disheartening considering, our medical system is a bit overwhelmed in the state of Alabama as is, not to mention adding this layer on top of it. So hopefully we'll do something about that here soon.
There's a lot of media going out around social media and also on the news showing lines that go for miles around stores, especially in small towns. So what is the shopping situation like currently in Alabama?
I have yet to see any situation that was like lines around stores. I have heard that a few of our stores have had that sort of in their opening hours over the last couple of days. But I actually took this seriously when the conversation started. Interestingly enough, I'm actually surprised that I did, because usually I'm not an alarmist and I think I'm pretty pragmatic. But I sort of heard that this was coming and I started stocking up like little by little. And so I didn't need to go to the store and do a big haul or anything like that. I just sort of started stocking my freezer and things of that nature. But all that to say, the stores that I do frequent, which are a few, there's like 3 grocery stores within a, close distance to my apartment. All of them, like the shelves, have restrictions placed on how many per item you can buy. And many of the meat freezers are empty, paper towel rolls empty, things like that. So I've seen a little bit of that here and there. I would imagine that those lines are starting to pop up when people realize what their stock days are and they're lining up to get in on that first day of stocking up. But it's been a little apocalyptic feeling here in certain areas of the grocery store. And then, of course, produce looks normal as usual.
Yeah, people aren't eating enough fruits and veggies.
They're not, but they don't keep, and I understand that. So I am guilty as charged in that department as well.
I have to say I am as well. Alabama is nationally seen as a less economically prosperous area, especially in media. Like, a lot of people are seen in Alabama as the stereotype of, a redneck or lower income. How do you think that this specific, global pandemic is going to affect people that are less economically stable?
So I think in a place like Alabama, we're going to see a lasting impact from, this entire pandemic for years if we don't flatten the curve here soon. So much of our small towns, so much of our rural areas are dependent on small businesses, family-owned businesses, and essentially everyone at this time is having a hard time figuring out how they're going to pay their rent for the next month, much less keep people employed. I know my mom owns a small business here. She's got roughly 10 employees, and her small business is a dance studio. Well, that's obviously, discretionary income. Like, people, if they're going to cut things, are going to start cutting things like their children's tuition to a dance studio. And so my mom is trying really hard to find creative and fun ways to keep her dancers engaged and entertained while they're at home, hoping to add value and bring that value back to her clients and her families at the studio. So I know a lot of business owners are coming up with creative and out of the box ways to keep their business running. I've seen that through much of social media, trying to keep in contact with those small business owners here. But I do think, especially in our rural areas, our state is already so economically depressed, and this could be sort of one of those final straws that forces families to move elsewhere, because after this is over, will there be opportunity to earn income? It's unclear.
So you said that you followed COVID at the beginning. Can you tell me the evolution of what your thoughts were from when COVID first kind of came out in media, and then what you did to prepare and what you currently think is going on?
I don't really recall at what point I began to take this more seriously, except for about 2 weeks ago, I was packing for a trip to New York City. I had bought, a cheap ticket. I was going to see some friends and just hang out, and the news started scaring me a little bit. There weren't too many confirmed cases in the United States yet, but I was thinking, I may not ever have symptoms. I'm young and relatively healthy, but what if I go and I bring it back? I have grandparents, just all these things started to float around in my head, and thinking about going through 2 major international airports, it just started to really worry me. So I would say for about 2 weeks, I've really been minding my P's and Q's as far as the way I interact with the rest of the world, and choosing to stay home before really anyone else was, to be honest. And part of that, to be fair, is that I have the luxury to do so. Most of the work that I do is from home anyway, so it wasn't as though I had to really interrupt my day-to-day life in order to make those decisions. So I do understand that looks different for everyone, but yeah, I'd say about 2.5 weeks it's been on the brain.
What do you think is currently going on, globally and also in Alabama with COVID right now?
To be really honest, I haven't turned on the news in maybe 3 days. A lot of the information that I get is coming through Twitter and Facebook. I think, like a lot of people, the news just really gets overwhelming when you hear the same sound bites over and over again. Yeah. But what I hope is going on is I know that we're trying really hard to pass legislation that allows for relief. What I hope that we're coming to is an agreement that it's the everyday working American that needs relief, and not our major corporations. We've seen in the past that doesn't necessarily trickle down to the everyday American, and this is a scenario where we cannot bank on business owners and corporations doing the right thing. We need to be able to put money and relief in the hands of people who really need it, and so I'm hopeful that that's what's going on. The realist in me doesn't know that that's going to be the case, but that's what I'm hopeful for. And I'm also hopeful that more people are understanding that the sooner they stay home and the sooner they distance themselves, the sooner this all goes away. So hopefully people are heeding caution and staying indoors.
That actually brings up a very good point, in that there's been a lot of social media coverage and also news coverage regarding these $1,000 checks that supposedly the administration is putting together as relief. Do you see that being a realization to every American through the systematic bureaucracy that we've come to know as our government? Do you think that that's something that could actually happen? And if so, how should people use that money?
I hope that this relief package that could potentially put $1,000 or $1,500 in the hands of everyday Americans comes to fruition. I think it is a possibility. It is going to be very difficult to get from point A to point B, just with the bureaucracy that we see across the country and any one of our government agencies, or any agency really. So I'm hopeful, but I also think that what we need to be looking at is relief by way of mortgage forgiveness. I'm sure you know and saw that Italy made it such that people didn't have to pay their rent or mortgage for a certain time frame. And I think that in order for any of us to survive this, that's really going to be the key. Ultimately, everything is about paying for the roof over your head. So if all mortgages are forgiven, then everyone can sort of come back to the plate with a clean slate. And I'm hopeful that we can find a solution that looks similar to that, because I really think that at the end of the day, that's really where every single person's thought process goes to, is how do I pay for this building that I own or the home that I live in? So that's really going to be, I think, the path for solution.
I've been trying to get out the shelter in place verbiage instead of lockdown or quarantine, just because I think that the way things are perceived is incredibly important. And shelter in place is completely indicative of the fact that you have to have a shelter. Like, I mean, there is a lot of consideration being given to homeless people in large cities, hopefully also in small towns, because small towns are not immune from homeless. And so, I really hope that this, stimulus package, like we said, getting money out to the average American is a high priority. But also when people see, claims of federal funding in the billions to bail out banks, those are the types of things that they are currently bailing people out of. It's not, hopefully, going into the pockets of the 1%. It's truly helping Americans. And, that's something that I think is also massively, massively important. We won't get into my political standpoint, but I do believe that there is a huge, huge balance between this giant machine that we've created in our country called capitalism, and those relief comes in a lot of different ways. So I want everyone to also remember that. Okay, so moving on, what do you think is going to be the biggest backlash of COVID-19 in Alabama and also the world?
I don't know if this would be considered backlash so much as I hope it's a realization that our healthcare system does not work for everyone. It doesn't even work for the people who have healthcare. And what we're seeing here is a huge, obviously we've seen the shortages across the country of just materials and supplies, but also the fact that there are so many Americans who don't understand that in this very moment, if they are sick, first and foremost, it is to take care of that sickness so that it doesn't spread. And so many Americans are without insurance or underinsured, and therefore scared to go to the doctor, scared of those bills that are going to come in. And so what I hope is that this wakes many people up to the fact that in America, Medicare for all might not be the solution, but we do need to do something to further insure Americans and make sure that people are prepared for situations like this, because ultimately our economy can't thrive if we don't have people to work in any of our businesses. And so healthcare really is the root of so many of our issues in our country. And I hope people wake up to that fact.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that we are starting to see in such a specific way that borders don't matter. We cannot close the border to a communicable disease. There's just not a way. And so I truly hope that not only do we as a country start to truly, truly, truly think about who we put into, places of power to make these decisions for us. I wish more people would have voted for you, Mallory Hagan. And you better come back. But I mean, on top of that, the globalization of this specific disease just shows how open communication between countries, nationalism isn't really a thing anymore to the extent of as it used to be. I mean, we used to be tribes, and then we, became cities, and then now we have to, as a people, realize that we are not just citizens of the United States. We are also citizens of the world, and I think that that's massively important in realizing that the fact that our current administration is having conversations about borders and things of that nature just really boggles my brain, and I don't understand it.
I think that it is incredibly humbling to many people in America who didn't quite realize that we were a part of a global community until they realize, hey, wait, every single person on the planet, literally everyone, no matter where they live or their socioeconomic status or any of those things, none of that matters because everyone is in the same boat right now. And so I do think that this time frame is I'm sure you've seen the memes that are like, this is Mother Nature telling us to go to our rooms and think about what we've done. But I really genuinely hope that this is a time for people to reflect on the fact that just because you were born on a certain plot of land in a certain space on the globe does not make you immune to the world's problems. And it also doesn't make you better than anyone else. At the end of the day, everyone is dealing with the same issues. And so I hope that this is a time to reflect and potentially be humbled by that.
Yeah, sit down, be humble.
Yeah.
That is massively well said. Like, that could have won you Miss America again. It will. What is one downfall that you've noticed within your area or globally, whichever you choose, during this global pandemic?
One of the downfalls of this is, I mean, you could look at it two ways. If you wanted to be positive, you could say this is a lot of time to do things that are creative, to read, to learn, to do things you've been wanting to do for a long time. But what's the saying? Idle hands do the devil's work. There are a lot of people who are sitting around with presumably nothing to do. There's always something to do. But, you know, I've struggled a lot with making myself do anything in any sort of routine. I've seen literally everything there is to see on any one of the streaming networks.
Me too.
I have. You know, my sleep schedule is absolutely just out of whack. And so I think that one of the downfalls is sort of this has a potential to put people in depressive episodes, which can be hard to climb out of. Even if the world tomorrow says you're fine, go back out into the universe. Well, after so many days of sort of no routine and nothing to do, it can be hard to put yourself back into a routine. So going back to the workforce or going back to those day-to-day activities that people normally do can be difficult. And so I think that we'll see the ramifications of that when this all comes to an end, if and when it does. How long are we going to be doing this? It's still unclear. But I do worry about that a little bit. I worry that if we start getting to a place where we have a shortage of commodities, that we'll see, you know, the worst in society in some of those ways. What I've seen here in town, though, is a lot of people trying to come together to find solutions. So my hope is that if we do run out of a certain commodity, that we figure out a way as a community to sort of trade and barter or just be communal versus, you know, fighting or looting or anything like that. But those are worries that I have that could become an issue if this goes on for too long.
Can you tell me a triumph that you've personally experienced or saw online or something that just makes you so happy that is happening through this time?
Well, as someone who worked in the restaurant industry for a really long time, and I worked in the restaurant industry in New York City, paying my bills, you know, very expensive bills through the many places I worked, I've seen so many restaurant groups that have been forced to close their doors, you know, put money into a GoFundMe and then also accepting donations to disperse equally to their employees and their staff. And that to me is heartwarming to see that these employers and these larger restaurant groups are really trying hard to take care of their own in this time when they can't provide them a place to work and they've had to close their doors. So I think things like that, you know, people being willing to buy gift cards to a small business in this time to use later so that they can stay afloat, of course, through this time frame. So I know I've personally done that and donated to those GoFundMes. I feel really lucky that I'm in a position to still make money during this time frame. And so I hope that the people who are in those positions are doing what they can to help alleviate some of this uncertainty for those people who really don't know when they're going to get paid next.
Exactly. I think that is also beautiful. I also, as you know, spent my entire childhood pretty much working in restaurants. So the fact that people are truly coming together to support people who, especially in the South, were only making $2 an hour and relying completely on tips, those are the people, some of the Americans who are most affected at this point in time. So please do go out there and research ways to help local businesses in your neighborhood. If every single person helps a local business in their neighborhood, then this will be a whole other type of amazingness that we can look back on and be proud of.
Well, I think talking about, we were joking earlier about just the beauty of technology, but truly in this time, like Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, I mean, all of these different services to be able to send $5 to your friend or your barista, the person you normally get your coffee from, all of those people are suffering. So I haven't had any of my regular coffee every day like I normally do. So instead, I'm trying to send that $4 or $5 that I would normally spend to someone who I know works in the restaurant industry. And I think if people do those small things, the small dollars that you normally spend, if you send them to somebody who could really need them, it'll add up eventually.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything specific that you would like to tell your local community and then also globally to the people watching this?
I think the thing that I would most like to say is that if you're feeling alone or isolated, that we do have so many different ways to connect with each other. And I know that typing on Facebook or social media is not necessarily it. So don't be afraid during this time to reach out and say, I just need to sit with someone. There are places you can go and things you can do where you minimize risk, but can also interact with someone face to face. For instance, I went to the park the other day and just walked around. I didn't congregate with anyone, but it was nice to see other pieces of humanity and to get some fresh air. So I would say to really take your mental health and this time frame of isolation seriously. And if you need help, to not be afraid to reach out and ask for it. Our whole world literally depends on all of us being in a mental space to take it on when this is all over. And so that's a global message, no matter where you live. I think that's really important. And then here locally, I really, really, really want our local people to take this seriously. I have a grandfather who works in one of our grocery stores. He still has to go to work, even though he's at the age range that's at risk. And so by you staying home, you are taking care of other people. You're taking care of your community. And it's really important that you do that. So please do.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Can you give people your social handles in case they would like to contact you? The name of this episode is going to be #distance together. And so, if somebody wants to reach out to you, where would they find you?
Sure. I would love to interact with everyone. I answer all DMs. I love Twitter. And all of my handles are at It's Mallory Hagan. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of it. It's all the same. But I'm old and I'm trying to figure out TikTok, so don't judge me.
I get it. I still can't even really do Snapchat.
TikTok. I feel so old on TikTok. I'm like, oh my God, how do kids spend 2 hours making a 30-second video? It kills me. But I love it. I'm very entertained by it. So thank you for doing that.
I love you very much. And you taking this time out of your day, even if you are sitting at home, means the world to me. So thanks so much.
No, thanks for having me. And thanks for doing this. I'm sure so many people are going to learn a lot from these, and way to make the best of some time at home,
Thanks, dude.
Bye.
Hi again, everybody. I actually got some very sad news from Mallory Hagan the day after I had a conversation with her, and she wanted me to give her a call to go over what she's currently going through. So let's give her a call and see what's going on.
This morning, I woke up to the news that someone who was a coworker and a boss to me in New York when I lived there for all those years in the restaurant industry passed away. So Chef Floyd Cardos passed away overnight, or I guess early this morning. And so many of us that knew him and worked with him just really knew that he was a different level of human being. Sometimes the restaurant industry creates sort of cutthroat personalities, and specifically in the kitchen, as I'm sure you recall. And Chef was just always someone who really took the time. Like he really took the time to get to know his employees and ask how you were doing. And I'll never forget when I started working for him, I was simultaneously starting a small business and really using my work in the restaurant to just bolster myself until I could get that small business off the ground. And he asked every day that he saw me, how's it going? It was like, ultimately it was his goal for me to not work there because he knew that that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And so he just offered as much help and guidance as he possibly could. And that's just a rare find, I think, anywhere really, but especially in the industry in New York. And so I was really sad to see that news, and definitely sad to see so many of my old coworkers sharing it as well.
Did they say like what reasoning or what thing behind COVID actually affected him and caused this death?
To be honest, I haven't read. I know that there have been articles. I've certainly seen things on social media, but I don't know the details. What I do remember is last week, actually, he posted on social media. He actually posted himself in a hospital gown and said, sorry to scare everyone. I just had been traveling. I wasn't feeling well, so I went to the hospital just to make sure everything was okay. And so I don't really know what transpired over the last 7 days, but it does seem to be surreal to think that he tried to take the necessary precautions and tried to do what he needed to do in order to stay healthy, and it just didn't come to fruition. And he's relatively young. He's 59 years old. All of this has been very real to me, as we spoke about. I have taken this seriously. It wasn't something that seemed so far away, but definitely waking up to the news that someone who's passed, and hearing my friends now having conversations about people they know and their family who had it, it's just getting a lot closer to home. And it's making these measures that we're putting in place all the more necessary, and hopefully all the more dire for people to pay attention to.
No, I totally agree. And I think that, looking on a screen and seeing the numbers across the world just growing and growing and growing, it's really a little hard for people in today's society to realize that each one of those numbers is a person. And those people are connected to, an entire family, group of friends, coworkers, everything. And so, just remember whenever you're out there looking at the numbers on screen or hearing the numbers, that each one of those numbers is a person. And
a ripple effect on communities and societies, right? It's not one death or one incident, but instead this ripple effect of all of these people who will now be suffering the loss of that person, but it's the loss of productivity, the loss of revenue, the loss of community. Like, it's all of these things transpiring at the same time. And to think that we're in a situation now where these people are passing and they don't get to have funerals. Yeah. There is no real closure for their family, for the people that are close to them, because they can't congregate in the way that they normally would, or the way that we traditionally do. So it's a really bizarre time to experience, for sure.
It is, for sure. Well, I just want to thank you for, letting me know what's going on. And I should probably let you go. But I really am very sorry for your loss. There are people in the world that touch you even just for like a small amount of time that really help you become who you are. And I'm really glad that you knew this chef. Can you say his name one more time?
Yeah, Chef Cardos.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'll let you go, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Mallory.